us on a working lunch with Nordin. We're very lucky to have Philomena today, who is the director of AIBD. Now I'm dyslexic, so that's why I always get that wrong when I go through those two letters in particular. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Philo. Of course, many people here in Malaysia know who you are, and many people around Asia know who you are. We're here to discuss misinformation, but tell us the vantage point in which you bring to the topic.
Thank you, Nordin, for inviting me to be a guest on your very happening working lunch. I know you were supposed to do this with some real lunch, but working
Exactly.
lunch is fine with me. And interesting topic, important for AIBD and its members. And it's all about disinformation, misinformation, and of course, you have such a thing as malinformation as well. So, yeah, AIBD stands for the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, and an organization that deals with almost 100 media partners and 26 governments. So, our job is to bring the knowledge of why media is so important, do a lot of capacity training, and we also, which is the Asia Media Summit globally every year. So we're not just Asia Pacific. We've got members in Africa now, and also France is a member of AIBD, and a whole host of partners from Latin America to Europe and to every other place in the world, actually. So it's a huge organization where media gather together, great minds of media, and we try our best to make media.
And today I really want to talk about how it impacts society. A lot of people in society see this word fake news. You know, it's fake news, you know, and we deal with that. But fake news and what we're talking about today, what is the same, what is different?
Okay, it's very exciting. I see a lot of LinkedIn users have joined us. Thank you for joining. And this is a very important topic because it can either make or break. I don't think anything fake will make anyone, but it will definitely do a lot of breaking. So what I'm saying is that, firstly, let's look at this disinformation. There's three types of things that we need to be very clear about. And the first one is disinformation, which means that that's information that's false, deliberately created to harm a person, a social group, an organization, or country. So this is the one that we are really scared about. This is disinformation. And the second type we're talking about is misinformation. So that's information that is false, but not created with the intention of causing harm. And then you have such a thing as malinformation. So this is reality, information that is actually based on reality, and it's used to inflict harm on a person, organization, or country. So misinformation is not dangerous, but disinformation and malinformation definitely is. Disinformation and malinformation. So these are the two danger points that we are looking at. And how they danger society, I think there's a lot of stories to tell. What do you call that? Nodding. So I see some
Yeah.
questions also, but I'll come to the question of Zuleika in just a bit. But it's a valid question that she's asking. Is
Yeah.
there anything else now that I've distinguished the
Yeah,
three?
I know it's good that you kind of like those three buckets in a sense of what we're looking at, or three silos, or and for me, there's always and often an overlap. You know, sometimes things start out as a misinformation, and then you see certain people say, "Oh, look, that has had an impact. Why don't we keep pushing that agenda? Why don't we keep pushing that?" And it often impacts. One thing I noticed, and of course, a lot of people joining us from LinkedIn, a lot of people from the business community. This has impacted a lot of businesses, you know, and we've seen, in a sense, competitive behavior around misinformation, malinformation, and and it attacks sometimes the CEO or sometimes attacks a certain company, but then other companies benefit from it. You know, and this is kind of things that we've seen. What do you see now in the Asia Pacific region? How different media organizations are dealing with this?
Okay, so it's an exciting thing that's taking place, especially uh, the pandemic, COVID-19, right? What has happened is it has given rise to infodemic. So with COVID-19, you can see that there's so much of infodemic. So many people are putting, I mean, you have the latest things, of course, being the vaccine and chips being in there and, what it can cause. And of course, when it started, COVID-19 started, it was something even more worse, right? So everybody is like having all kind of information. And a while ago, I think Zuleika was asking a question about, does the internet contribute to this? Yes, of course it does. But human beings have always been known to talk. Way before the internet came about, we always had these gossip sessions. I'm sure men gossip as well, besides women. So human beings are social creatures. So we tend to talk. And this is how a lot of rumors, a lot of gossip spreads. But today, you've been given a platform to gossip even further. And this time, very, very dangerously, because it's so fast in spreading this kind of rumors or gossip that we're talking about. And the internet has enabled this, right? So, and with all the social media that's available, we have WhatsApps and we have, you have things like Twitter and Facebook, and you have everything. So if you look at Twitter, 500 million tweets are sent in a day, 500 million, and 65 million messages per day happen across WhatsApp. And in YouTube, you have 45% increase of live streaming by YouTube, right? And on Facebook, you see about 240,000 photos uploaded daily. So this is the kind of info that you can gather that's happening on social media today, Nordin. So this is really, really
Mhm.
something that's happening. And what can a real media do about it? When I say that we have two types of media now, right? We have social media and you have traditional media. So what do you do when you have social media? You can't do anything. You're just consuming the news. You and I are the end producers. I think a while ago you asked me about somebody is out to defame someone. You have, of course, the Defamation Act and all those things in law. But what's important is you have this architect of fake news. You have these people, and it could be to bring down a society or a community or a business or a person or an individual. Only prominent people suffer anyway. So it could be someone who is an architect, and then this architect has some enablers who are people on all those random and some kind of anonymous account holders who are actually spreading, and then they also create a group of opinion makers. So it's like a network. So they have a group of opinion leaders who actually take this, and then they will be a further architect in sharing this information with the whole world or whole of Malaysia or whole community, whatever you talk about it, business community. So they target, and then comes you and me. So we get it, and then some of these information might be like, oh, this is relevant to me. I feel so important sharing this. The thing about WhatsApp sharing or any kind of sharing that we do nowadays, we feel important that we are contributing to something in the world by sharing a piece of information without fact checking. So that results in a lot more damage because I share with you and you share with me. And sometimes there are people who actually click, click, click everything. Thank God WhatsApp only enables like 5 shares, but I don't know how people break this, but they do this as well. So there's a lot of sharing, and what you share matters. So this is with social media. And what does real media or traditional media do? So our job is actually to fact check what social media is doing. Because somebody tells me, I was in the newsroom some years ago, and they tell me, okay, there's this news on this portal that says this, should we put it? I say, no, you can't. You've got to fact check, whether this is even true. They could be out to get you, to undermine your credibility, because traditional media has to uphold the truth, credibility, and you're accountable. Because tomorrow somebody might just take action on you, but it's very hard to take action on someone who is posting something on WhatsApp. You don't even know who the person is. So I think that disinformation, which really creates threats and harms the society, and misinformation eventually might grow into that. So there's a need to stop it. But how do you stop it? That's a million dollar question.
Yeah,
Yes.
almost $1 billion question. I think one of the things that Grace commented, I think Grace, thank you for joining us. I think you're joining us from Singapore, if I remember correctly. Is in terms of filtering that information by local regulators and kind of trying to clear the airwaves with a lot of that mess. We've seen a lot of technology being used on both sides of this equation. Technology by those. I like the word that you use, architects of these kind of almost architects of attack. And often it turns into a crisis for a company or a government even. and then we see a lot of technology being used there, bot attacks and all kinds of technology. But then there's also technology on the defensive side. How much have broadcasters who are looking at what's trending in social media aware of how easy it is to manipulate the news sometimes?
What did you mean again? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, how easy it is. I mean, how much has the mainstream media understood how easy it is that the technology can be used to manipulate what's going on in social media, and do they often
And
get
vice
caught out?
versa. Okay, this is an interesting question because today technology has become an enabler, right? So if you look at citizen journalism, for instance, if something's happening somewhere, and more so in this pandemic, there's a lot of remote broadcasting. There's a lot of remote pictures that we get from remote, meaning we're working from home kind of thing. So a lot of data might come out from citizens, right? So it's the duty of the media bodies to actually fact check. A lot of people might want to share. They say something has happened here. They could be just lifeless and send you something on WhatsApp, which you have
Mhm,
to really check. So citizen journalism has to be taken a little bit more seriously because it's not something so easy. It's something that
mhm,
needs to be checked. But back again to your question, technology has enabled this kind of sharing and so forth. And it's good because technology is good, but we are using it for a wrong reason. And therefore, Nordin, what needs to be done is to educate people, right? I think Grace
mhm,
mentioned about authorities. But before we come to authorities level, it's the individual. So there's such a thing as media literacy. So if you look at countries like Korea, for instance, they have a media literacy center where everyone knows the importance of media and how to use it. What do you call that? Responsibly, right? To understand why it's important. Of course, they have fake news as well, but media literacy plays an important role in educating young people, especially in schools. So AIBD is actually working with the UNICEF to reach out to young people and talk about media literacy because you need to understand how media works, how architects work, and why they are targeting people like us because we are easy game and we just share
mhm,
without thinking. So we need to understand the impact of all this disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, all these fake stuff, how it affects individuals, countries. Leaders have lost their positions, businesses have failed simply because someone is hitting at them by putting a fake story, right? And
mhm,
in creating fake opinions, right? But to actually regulate this is also not an easy task because you have to
mhm,
bring people like Facebook. Are they willing to work with you? You have to bring back all these kind of multi platforms. They should be working hand in hand as well. But of course, I think for Malaysia, some action has been taken on people who post scandalous or fake stuff about individuals. I think action has been taken so far by some social media platforms.
mhm, mhm.
So it is there actually. Yeah.
Okay, nice, nice. One of the things that you mentioned two words, media literacy, well, it's a term, and also citizen journalism. So if citizens are going to be involved in journalism and it's a question of literacy, should it now find its way into the curriculums of education, ministries of education around the region, so that the students at a younger age can be educated, long before it's they're in the working world.
Okay. So I think it's so important to educate the young because if you look at social media users, of course, now everyone has a smartphone, everyone is taking pictures and sharing the kind of things you see sharing. A while ago, I mentioned about the number of sharing that happens. But what's important is to tell our young people what the impact of sharing can be like. It can be detrimental. Too often young people don't know, right? Because they just think
Hmm.
you've heard of suicide among young people, right? We just celebrated World Suicide Day, and you can
Prevention
see
Day.
that
Hmm.
social media has contributed towards that. Fake news about some people, all these can hype. These platforms can actually hype up the situation. So that's why it's so important to educate. and it should be a curriculum at school, or it could be something that you have so many societies and clubs at school level. So this media clubs, media literacy clubs should also be started. So we are trying to work towards that to get young people involved in understanding social media better. Yes.
Great, good comment. And I saw one comment from India. And hi, Victor. Also, it's great to see you joining us as well. Stella from India just mentioned, in some of the channels that she saw some problems with fake news and fake images and wrong images even. Are certain countries doing better than others? Is there a ranking system at the moment? Is there, like we see the World Media Freedom Ranking? Do we have a ranking for misinformation, malinformation, and fake news?
Think it's a difficult thing to do. Like for instance, in France, they have, you have these apps that people use, or the media itself uses. Media itself can be deceived, because people tell you, hey, I saw this news on this channel. How come you're not putting it? I think in Malaysia it has happened. Like one of the channels were actually taking social media figures during the elections, the past election, and then someone was saying, "Oh, so and so has won." I think this happens a lot, but this is so dangerous because this shouldn't be happening, but we have done it, and that's why it's so important to actually do fact checking. And media has to always, instead of being afraid of fake news, I think we have to sort of go heads on and take action. So that I think is so vital. Yeah.
There's some
Yes.
other questions around fake news. Opinions is another one. I mean, we're starting to really start to get into kind of this broader spectrum of understanding. But if we could bring that back to, in a sense, the corporate world, how should corporations now deal with the media if they are perceiving themselves to be victims of fake news or misinformation or a malinformation attack, for example?
I think it's important in public relations, basically, to face the actual consequence and to come out straight and make a what do you call that, a press conference, perhaps, especially if it gets very detrimental. We can't just sweep things under the carpet or say, oh, let them talk, because some things can get very detrimental, especially if you're running a business. Let's say it's about your product or about you as an individual. You as an individual, if you're a public figure, it's okay. If someone's talking about Philo or Nordin, it's okay. It's like most public figures have to face that. But when you're talking about a product, and that's very important. So it's important to come out and make a statement and be clear about it, and then get the media involved, right? And clear this matter as soon as possible. If somebody says your product has this thing inside and it's going to be killing people, you definitely need to take action. So I think it's so important to look at this, because this is not just regular gossiping that comes and goes. This is more, and that's why I say that disinformation has the capacity to break societies or even companies or individuals. So it's so important to really look at this seriously. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And I apologize, Cheryl. You're in. I mentioned that she was in India. I think she was commenting on a report from India, but she's actually in Malaysia. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining us today.
That's
Um,
nice.
yeah. So one of the questions Shafira has asked us is around the legal ramifications. Have we put in place the laws to deal with the spread of fake news? I know there was a repeal recently of the Fake News Act in Malaysia, but what acts are there in Malaysia that deals with this issue?
It's a very sensitive question, Shafira, because yes, Malaysia has repealed it, and I don't think many countries want to actually have a law on fake news, because it's not easy, right? It could digress to something else. Singapore has really studied this. I think somebody here is from Singapore. Singapore does have a law, and we worked very closely with Singapore on their laws and how they're going about it. They even brought Facebook to questioned them actually when they put up something on their economy. I think it came out on Facebook. Somebody posted, and then they just started doing things like, you know, I'm getting overwhelming response from your people. Nordin, you're so popular.
No, it's
So
not me, it's you, you know.
no, no, I think we've got a lot of people who actually followed. But you know what? Singapore did a real case study. They've done a lot, and they actually brought Facebook um, and said, "Look, this is wrong. Can you take down this piece of information that was put up by somebody?" So it was taken out, but they do have a law. So there are countries with fake news laws, but we don't advocate. Like AIBD doesn't tell people you should have a law. We just tell them the pros and cons. So Malaysia had, but the fear is it could work differently. Somebody mentioned about freedom of speech, right? So this comes into play. Victor, you're right, because when you talk about disinformation and in fake news, how do you know it's fake news? I can say, okay, it's fake, right? So there's a lot of debate about it. So freedom of speech should not be inhibited. So there's a thin line, and so people are law is not the answer, right? So, but a matter of creating awareness. People should know what's right and what's wrong. Just like I said, people blindly share on WhatsApp. If you get a message, or you have to share. There's this social media thing. It's like an innate craze. I see people get up in the morning. The first thing that everyone. Yesterday, I was in the car and I was watching. Everybody was walking around with just a phone, looking at their phones and walking. Right. So it's so dangerous. We are so into sharing, and that's what has happened because we are addicted to our phones. So it's time we really took a look and ask ourselves, do I need to share this? Look at all the data that we're sharing. This is really, really something that we have to think about and ask ourselves how much of time we are spending on social media. So I think maybe it calls for better governance and also the knowledge about what it can do, the detrimental effects of social media. I mean, there are good things, of course, but fake news is definitely not a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think one of the things I just want to recognize Michael Warren, who's joining us. Of course, he's one of our Malaysian tech gurus, I dare say. And of course, I'd love to get him on the show. I've been trying to get him on the show, but thank you for watching, Michael. And one of the things that we see now is the responsibilities of these tech companies who are for me they're not tech companies, they're media companies, and but they've driven it from a technology perspective. They've become more responsible, and I think they've tried to deal with what's happened in several elections around the world. Several protests have happened, even fueling different conflicts and revolutions based on these tech media platforms, and that has become something that is incredibly difficult for someone like AIDB to deal with.
Right. Asia
Yeah,
Pacific.
this is dyslexia is coming to me again. Is Are you fighting a losing battle, or are you starting to be able to see that mainstream media have also gone into these platforms, so they're kind of also part of the ecosystem now? What are you seeing there?
It's a good question. I don't think media can just survive by being just radio or television, right? Like, for instance, we started TVAIBD, and TVAIBD is a digital platform. You're going digitally and you're talking about disinformation. Now, this is so important for regular media to actually be on multi platforms because the world has changed. You have a techie who's actually tuning into the show, and the thing is, people are not really watching statically, sitting down and watching TV. Or we want to be on the move. Like I said, I'm walking and sharing info. Things are happening that way. The way we consume media has changed. So therefore, media players have to make sure that their product is on all platforms, right? But that doesn't mean you have to give the fake news or stuff that's not ethical or credible. You have a duty. So, like I said, media is the fourth estate, and you have to ensure that you give neutral views. And there are many media people out there who give views that are not neutral. They feel that they have to support somebody or something like that. You don't support anybody. So if you're doing a talk show, you're not going to support anybody. You're going to make the audience out there listen to you, and they have to understand what they want to choose. So that's the duty of media. So we don't, don't put ideas or words into the audience. Victor says he prefers listening to independent journalists, so he doesn't trust the mainstream media. But Victor, I just want to say that during the pandemic, it was mainstream media that gave you the right news. So independent journalists are good, but there must be a sense of responsibility and integrity, like Grace is saying. Yeah, that is important. And I think right now, Victor, with social media, you get lots of independent journalists who want to be popular. So you got to be careful because they also have an agenda. There's this innate need for popularity. So you get
Hmm.
lots of gurus, right? So if you look at the India, you have lots of gurus who say, they come up with prophecies or things. Similarly, you get a lot of media gurus, people who say things, right, just because they want to say. So a person who's giving his own view is not a journalist, Victor. So that person is just someone who is giving his point of view, which may not be right. So
Hmm. Hmm.
journalism is something you give both the pictures. That's why when I was a journalist, I always say, I used to tell ministers, I say, come on, let me put this in the right way for you. Because once you tell the truth, you say this, people will be like, wow, then you will have more believability. But it took a lot of guts to tell that to a minister, because he will not take you seriously. But you should look at. I don't think this thing is only in the US or India, but I find that true journalism does exist. But it's
Hmm.
also you, the consumer, who determines that. Do you want to listen to the real stuff, or do you prefer to listen to the fake stuff? So I think
Hmm.
accountability, Victor, like you mentioned, is really, really what it's all about. Media organizations should not be out there to make a buck or be popular or just to get some foreign person to be funding you. There's a lot of that happening. So that's not what we want. We want someone who is reporting the right news. And when you report the right news, then you get everybody afraid. And then they will be becoming more ethical because they know that, all right, AIBD or whatever organization only reports the right news. So that's what we should be heading for. And as consumers, you should be looking for that.
Hmm.
I think I've said my piece.
No,
So
wonderful, Philo. I really enjoy talking to you. It's wonderful. Now, Philo, I want to ask you, we talk about misinformation. We got excited about it. Now, let's talk about it on a societal level. What can we do as a society? Okay, let us assume now that yes, we are the handphone society, without giving any advertising to whoever that company is producing that handphone. But we're plugged into our handphones, we're plugged into social media. In a sense, we're plugged into the matrix. What what does this mean for society? And how will we evolve to a better society? And how will media play its part?
I think it's okay to be plugged onto a handphone. Today, if you don't have a handphone, you might be termed as a dinosaur. So you really need one because it's such a useful tool when you're going into 5G. There's so many things you can do. People are doing business. Look at this pandemic. So many people are not going out. I depend on the handphone to get my food or to buy things. So I don't have to go out. So this is so important. This is such an important tool. And I think it's vital, especially with connectivity is so important, especially during this pandemic when our children are not going to schools. So they are studying online. And I know of families who can't afford, laptops or something, and their kids get affected, right? So this is so important to actually have a connectivity. It's important to have these tools. These are all just tools. Whatever we're talking about, handphones and everything is tools. But ethics is something which is something that everyone who runs a media organization, governments, it calls for a greater picture. So I don't think you can just change it overnight. But the moment you and I start taking action by only wanting the right thing, then yes, it is important, right? So we need to be educated. We need to make a stand. This is wrong news. I'm not going to consume it. And somebody asked a question whether there's any one independent media which is independent of politicians. I don't think so. Any media anywhere is. But I want to cite an example in Thailand. They have we have so many members, right? So Thai PBS is one of the members of AIBD, and they are like a very independent media, right? And it's interesting. They are funded by the government, but they ask questions. So if there's an issue in the country, so they go out. Thai people are quite outspoken, so they go out and they actually question, and the programs are done in such a way. But it's neutral. It's not that they're taking the side of the opposition or anything, but they bring out the issue. So I think that if we are able to look at the issue at hand instead of individuals, we'll be better able to solve problems rather than having, there's a lot of hate speech or whatever you call it. It's targeted at individuals. So we need to look at a key issue and see the ways to overcome it rather than looking at individuals. And, so there's a lot of debate about individuals. Yeah.
Philo, our time actually, we usually go for half an hour, and it's just flown by today. And I really appreciate your time here today, and I appreciate everyone who's joined us from of course Malaysia and all around the region. And I really appreciate the very fervent, very excited discussion that we had with
Yes,
our
I can
guests
see
today.
that. I can see
Yeah,
that. So
exactly,
maybe I think we
exactly.
need a conversation later. So, so there's a lot of questions that Victor has. So those are all valid questions, and it's good questions, right? It's always good to get a good question and to answer it. I think that's the advice that I have for people. Do not hide or do not beat around the bush. If something is wrong, you have to say it. Actually, it might get you lots of stuff when you admit things rather than you beat around the bush. So I think, Nordin, you are a public relations guy, so you know this better.
True, true. Thank you, though, Philo. I really appreciate your time today and giving us that high level perspective from the region, as well as being able to understand many on ground cases from the region. I think it's very important what you're doing, and I wish you all the best. I hope you continue to do that, and I hope you continue
Yeah.
to improve the understanding of media, and we help as a society and as a community deal with the crisis of misinformation, the crisis of malinformation, and this kind of challenge that we have with fake news. So, with that, Philo, I'm going to give you the last word, and it's over to you to wrap up the show today.
Thank you, Nordin. I think misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, these are all not good things. And it can hinder society, it can hinder individuals. So I would say fact check, right? Fact check and read, and don't just consume what people give you. So that's the way to go ahead, right? To really make sure that whoever someone's talking about, you're checking. If someone's talking about your family, would you just accept it? No, you'd probably check, or you would probably confront an individual. But all these are done in anonymity, so it's tough. So it calls for a good sense of discernment. I think many of you shared that word, and it's important. So let's not look at laws. What's important is empowering people to know what is right and what is wrong. So I think, yes, thank you so much, Nordin, for having me on the show. This is a very exciting topic, and we've actually done a lot of research on this and trying to make it's my mission to make media the fourth estate that it's supposed to be. It should not be owned by anybody or have opinions of particular groups, but media should be playing its role as a neutral body. And I hope that I achieve this, right? And it's not just Malaysia we're talking about, because I am in charge of media from across Asia Pacific and other regions as well. So it's a tough job. Not America, not any country. So please, there's no country that I can quote to you right now, Victor. So, but
Yeah.
I think it's important to have freedom in inverted commas, though. Otherwise, you get people without masks, right? And that's happening a lot because that is the price you pay for freedom, right? So, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Philo, and we look forward to getting you on the show again. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us on a working lunch with Nordin. And we'll see you again next week. And thank you once again.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you, Nordin.